What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron and frequent guest of the show, Evan Dyal. What's up, guys?
Hey, Nick. How's it going?
What's going on, boys? It's always a pleasure to be doing this midweek podcast. Just makes the week fly by.
Yeah, got a little bit of news to talk about as well, some exciting stuff in the NBA. But before we get started, as always, just a quick reminder, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, YouTube. Share, retweet, subscribe, let us know what you think. But guys, let's start with Carmelo. Obviously, the trade officially, I believe, went through, the trade between OKC, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. And now Melo's going to sign with Houston 1 year, $2.4 million. What were your thoughts initially when you saw this?
The Melo Hawks era was, but I got the trade from all angles for OKC, Philly, and Atlanta. And then as far as Melo signing for Houston, it's $2.4 million. It's only 1 year, and I think offensively it can actually work. Now that I think Melo has probably been a little humbled over the past year, and he's got a good friend in Chris Paul, and he's willing to move past the D'Antoni thing. And he could play more, USA Melo and just be a three-point shooter. And he's playing with two really, really good passers who should get him a lot of looks. How he fits into their defense as it goes to the playoffs and they start switching everything, I don't know. And then, of course, whether the question if he starts or not, and my guess he is start to just kind of protect his ego. But overall, I'm fine with the signing, even though I do definitely have some concerns about it, but it's a year, it's cheap. I'm okay.
Yeah, so the contract wise, this is fine. Melo went from making $28 million to $2.4 million, and the Hawks are the only ones who had to pay him that kind of money. The outstanding contract he had, obviously, in the trade. I think for Houston, it's an addition offensively, like you mentioned, Evan. Obviously they've lost Ariza and Abalamute. Ariza struggled in that final game last year in the Western Conference Finals where he missed, 9 3-pointers, I believe it was. So Melo, offensively should be an addition. He can play the small ball 4. Realistically, this would be the best case scenario for the Rockets if Melo came off the bench, if he kind of accepted that 6-man role and just being, pretty much having the role of we need you to come in the game and kind of get buckets, which is similar to what Eric Gordon's role is. Like you mentioned, in the playoffs, how he handles the constant switching that occurs is going to be something to keep your eye on. But Melo is a good friend of Chris Paul. That relationship should not go, should not be slept on, because that's a big reason why he's in Houston. I think he honestly was choosing between playing with his friend LeBron and playing with his friend Chris Paul. We heard the rumors about Miami, so he also thought about playing with his friend Dwayne Wade. So Melo was just looking for the best situation that he felt where he could play with a friend and win a title. And obviously Houston was so close, so he went to Houston. I don't think this is a bad move by any means, but we have to see we just have to see what kind of Melo comes into training camp. Like, is this a Melo who still thinks he's, hey, P, these are going to come off the bench. Like, is it still Melo's ego, or is Melo kind of, like you said, more humble possibly?
Yeah, you guys are pretty spot on. There's pros and cons, and I think anytime you get a player of the talent level of Melo at 1 year, $2.4 million, you definitely got to grab it. It kind of puts a little pressure on D'Antoni to kind of make him fit. But you guys mentioned this. How do you think Melo will fit in Houston? Will he change his game? Will he be more of that Olympic Melo? Will Harden, CP3 get the best out of him?
Well, there's questions, as kind of Kory alluded to. A, is he willing to come off the bench? And B, do some things he's probably never done before, like Mike D'Antoni may ask him to play center at some point. That wouldn't surprise me. PJ Tucker played center for them in the playoffs. And, the Rockets try stuff like that. And so Melo's got to be willing to take different roles. But I think he will. I think when he signs with a minimum, I think he's kind of knows his role. He knows the pecking order of the team. I hope he's at least willing to come off the bench, for matchup at some point. But I think he fit in, and it should work at least offensively.
I really don't have anything else to add. I think everything I've been said I completely agree with. I don't know what else I could add to that.
Yeah. Do you guys think that Melo's going to have a better season in Houston than he did in OKC? Obviously, last year with OKC career low in field goal attempts, assists, field goal percentage. Bounce back year in Houston?
100%. 100%. He played with a guy Westbrook who really needs the ball, and even though Westbrook gets those assists, those triple-double assists, like a lot of them are kind of like dish-offs and handoffs. Like they're not like at times true assists. Like he doesn't really get other guys involved in going. Like he's playing with Chris Paul and James Harden. Both these guys get others involved. They drive, they kick out the shooters. I think the flow of the Houston's offense is going to be so much more smooth for Melo compared to the offense in OKC. I mean, even still in Houston, there's a ton of three-point shooters. They didn't have that in OKC. They really just had those three guys as their top, scoring options.
Yeah, I agree. He's about to play with the two best passers he's probably ever played with. And those are guys who are capable of spoon-feeding him just easy buckets, so he won't have to work as hard. And plus, he was just really bad last year. I think he has to be a little more efficient. It may not be a huge bounce back, but I think he'll definitely be better.
How much does he have left? Like, what can we really expect talent-wise from him? Like, obviously, OKC, we just all said it was a down year. Like, where is he at in his career, like, expectation-wise?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, I think he's long gone from being an all-star or anywhere close to that. He just has to be just basically just a shooter who could sometimes run a little offense through bench units, and play the 3 or the 4. So just like a solid starter, I think is the best case scenario, which is quite a fall from where he was 2 years ago, but still useful.
I think best case scenario is like 18 points per game. The rebounds and assists, you're going to get whatever you get with Melo, I think, when it comes to that. But, then shooting, 42 and 38, I don't expect him to have, huge huge scoring efficiency numbers. But if he can become a 37% and up 3-point shooter, I think that's exactly what the Rockets are hoping they get.
Yeah, and that's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities. I'm sure he shot around that number in his career. Last year was, I think, his 6th lowest in terms of three-point percentage. So, and he'll probably get more open looks in Houston. Now, do you guys think there is, obviously looking at it quickly and, most likely Houston won't be better, but do you think there's any chance that Houston can be better with Melo than last season?
That's tough because they won like 66 games last season. So I would probably take the under, so they may be a little worse in the regular season. Actually, if I had to pick, I'll say worse because it'll be hard to match regular season totals. And then in the playoffs, I have some just concerns about how his defense will hold up. So I'll go a slight worse.
I'll say they can be slightly better. I'll go the opposite route. Although I do agree that I don't think Melo would be the reason that it's hard to be slightly better when you win, a franchise record and wins. But I think they can remain relatively how successful they were last year, despite whatever Melo you get. As long as Melo is sub-decent, because I think James Harden has to take another leap, right? He probably gets better. Clint Capella probably gets better. So, yeah, you're going to miss the defense of Trevor Ariza and Abalamute at times. But I think, it may balance itself out with how some of these guys continue to progress and how, maybe Melo fits in slightly better than he did with OKC.
If it was up to you guys, who would you start, Carmelo or James Ennis?
I would start James Ennis, and they probably won't. But I think Ennis, especially Melo guarding threes, is really tough for him at this point. He doesn't have a lot of quickness, and he always struggles being in and out of shape and with weight. I would go Ennis, and I would bring Melo off the bench as kind of small ball 4 shooter.
What's the starting 5 in this scenario? What am I looking at?
Let's
Melo?
just assume last year we just swap out where Ariza was. You got CP3, Harden, then blank spot, PJ Tucker, and Capella.
Okay. Yeah, if they're trying to plug in a small forward, James Ennis, I think, has to start because, as Evan said, I don't think you can rely on Melo to be any sort of wing defender at this point of his career. The only way he can really play efficiently is when he plays at the power forward. And of course, you rather have PJ Tucker's toughness and defensive ability out there than Melo, unless Melo is playing phenomenal. But that just doesn't seem like a likely thing yet.
What would be the most interesting lineup you think Houston could throw out next year? Maybe including Melo. What would be the one that you want to see? I know, Evan, you're big on lineups.
Yeah, well, I touched on it earlier, and I would love to see him as a small ball 5 because Melo has a lot of faults, but he's a really good rebounder, and he always has been. He's really strong. And it probably could make things a little bit easier for him on defense if they just have him hang back and rebound. I mean, he won't be a rim protector either, but as a small ball 5 that could shoot, and then you surround him with good defenders like PJ Tucker, Ennis, Chris Paul, I think that's something to definitely work. I'm not saying it's a guarantee to work, but I would try it.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
I think my small ball 5 would be PJ Tucker at the 5, Melo at the 4, James Ennis at the 3, and then Harden Paul.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of fun combinations they can mess with. Obviously, they have Gordon too, and Melton, who they drafted as well, I think is going to be an interesting guy. They might end up getting some more playing time.
Actually, you're right. Actually, a better lineup would be if you swap out James Ennis and you put Eric Gordon in there to have him play the 3, just because then you have so many
super offense. Yeah, that would be a lot.
That's buckets.
If you don't score every possession, it looks bad.
And then PJ Tucker said, "Listen, do whatever you have to do, but do not let that center get rebound. Just beat the shit out of him."
Yeah, it gives you some toughness down there with him. Moving over to the OKC side, just quickly, what are your thoughts on Dennis Schroeder joining OKC?
I'm not the biggest Schroeder guy in the world, obviously, because of contract. He also has legal issues pending and plays zero defense. But yeah, at least he's a backup and he could be a creator off the bench. And they haven't had a good backup creator in like forever. So I get the appeal and why they wanted him. But I do have concerns if him and Russ can play together extended minutes. Because obviously Russ needs the ball. Dennis Schroeder can't really shoot either. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but as a backup point guard, it's a pretty good deal.
It's a lot of money for a backup point guard, that's for sure.
It is.
I was sort of surprised that this was, obviously the Hawks were trying to get rid of Schroeder and they want to get rid of Melo, so I guess it works out and get a younger guy. But to me, it was a strange. Like I like the idea of the move to try and bring in another, borderline all-star and a guy who can play. But to me, it's just such a strange fit. I know I saw a lot of memes where it was like, picture of Reggie Jackson. It was like upgrade Dennis Schroeder. And I was like, I don't even know if that's really that much of an upgrade. Dennis Schroeder doesn't play any defense. Reggie Jackson doesn't really either, but at least he seems more engaged defensively.
He's more capable with his size. Schroeder's just always going to be undersized and kind of get bodied around.
Right. But I do like it for, the contract. I don't like it, but, Schroeder as a 6-man coming off that bench unit, it's not the worst thing. I'm sure they're going to play a lot of 2-guard lineups with Schroeder and Westbrook. But I like it because OKC is remaining aggressive. I mean, this is a team that continues to reshape this roster to try and win. So I like that, the fact that the management re-signs Paul George and it's not, all right, let's bring back Jeremy Grant and let's not do some of these smaller moves. And they get a decently young piece back in return for, shipping out Melo, which I think is a plus. Yeah,
they got something where they probably thought they were going to end up having to buy him out or stretch him, which would have really hurt their books. The fact they're able to trade him was definitely a lot nicer. Talking about Westbrook and Schroeder, do you think this is a big season for both of them in terms of there's obviously been some negative perception of them in terms of a player always wanting the ball and stuff like that, especially Westbrook. Now working with another guard, obviously having to play off ball and kind of making that work. Do you think this will say a lot about both those guys if they're able to make it work this season? Like Westbrook goes a little bit off ball, Schroeder works a little bit off ball, kind of adds to their career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big season for both. And Westbrook, probably since Reggie Jackson, he hasn't played with a guard like Schroeder. There was the Oladipo failed experiment too, but showing that you could play off the ball in 2-guard lineups is huge for any guard's value in today's NBA. And obviously Westbrook needs to improve his shooting and obviously get some tunnel vision. So he needs to prove that, he can be more of a team guy and be more versatile in terms of lineups. And then Schroeder has a ton to prove. Just, can he be a backup? Can he improve his shot? Can he at least get to respectable on defense? So I think it's a big year for both, but probably a little more for Schroeder if he wants to ever earn a starting contract from another team.
I think it's a big year, but I don't think anything changes. I don't see Westbrook deferring. I don't see Westbrook giving the ball up to Schroeder more often. I just think Westbrook is the Westbrook we've seen, is the Westbrook we're going to get. If he didn't change for Kevin Durant, he ain't going to change for Dennis Schroeder. I just don't see it.
True.
I just think Westbrook is going to keep the ball in his hands. Maybe he'll be more open and understand that you have to let other guys get involved more. But I still think we're talking about him maybe changing, giving up 10 possessions. I just don't think he's going to give up a ton of ball time. I just don't see that happening. But definitely is a big year for Schroeder. I mean, this guy's never shot crazy efficiently. He's never shot that great from deep. As you mentioned, Evan, defensively, he needs to show something, some kind of ability to stop somebody, because the whole point, right, is to beat the Warriors. And Dennis Schroeder is going to get toasted in that series 9 times out of 10 defensively. But I think it's a big season for both, but I don't know if anything changes on at least Westbrook's front.
Yeah, it definitely, I think it's a big season for both too. And even in a smaller way, they could save Westbrook a couple minutes a game because you feel more comfortable having Schroeder out there as a backup point guard, kind of able to create a little bit. And he can get hot. He's gotten hot in the past before too. But moving on from the Melo, the OKC stuff, Kevin Love signed an extension kind of almost out of nowhere. 4 years, $120 million. Add that with his current deal, it's 5 years, $145 million. Thoughts on this move?
I mean, I wouldn't have done it, but I'm not surprised. Cleveland appears like they want to compete and try to make the playoffs in the East, which I don't think they will. But, Love will be their number one player, and he's still a really good player who's probably going to average around 20 and 12. And the extension's not too unreasonable. But there's two sides of the coin, and some say it's untradeable now, but it actually could be a little more tradable because there's no looming free agency. So teams may think they get a more long-term commitment out of him. But it's still a fair amount of money that goes until he's 34. So at least it won't be impossible to trade, which is, thank God for them, in case things go south. But overall, I would have rebuilt, as soon as LeBron left. But that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't like this contract at all. I actually, part of me really hates it. I like it for the purpose of the brand that is the Cavaliers, and keeping face, the franchise, showing the fans, we're not just because we lost. I feel like it's more like the franchise saying we don't care LeBron left. This is them proving a point that we're going to try to remain competitive, and we're not tanking, we're not rebuilding. This is just us retooling without LeBron. So I think this is more of them trying to make a point. And obviously, Kevin Love has, he's been the scapegoat on that team. He's been beaten down a lot by the media whenever anything went wrong during that last LeBron tenure in Cleveland. But I don't know. I just don't like $30 million a year for Kevin Love. I mean, I can't say he doesn't deserve it because he has had some phenomenal moments for them throughout his career too. He won a title there. But a guy who can't stay healthy. He'll be 34, making $30 million his last year. It's just, I don't know. If he stayed healthier, then maybe. But now it just feels like he gets a lot of weak, not weak injuries, but these injuries, they just hold him down, and they seem to pop up more and more often. The weirdest ones, in that playoff series against the Pacers, he tore a ligament in his thumb off the ball, just hitting his thumb wrong. I mean, that's just a bad luck injury. He had his dislocated shoulder in 2015 when Kelly Olynyk pulled it out. And then obviously those aren't injuries that he, it's not his fault. They just kind of happen. But it feels like these kind of injuries happen more and more to him the older he gets.
Yeah. I definitely think the injury thing is something, and the age is concerning with it. But kind of like both you guys said, from the franchise perspective, they're just kind of remain competitive. And I think the time where they lost LeBron the first time and then in between period, they were so bad, they're kind of scared to get back to that point. So they're like, all right, well, we'll have Love. He'll kind of keep us somewhat relevant. And I understand that, but at the same time, it's like you just put out a lot of money for a guy like Kory said, who's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's going to turn 30 in September. It's a little bit scary. What are your guys' thoughts on it, the contract down the road? Obviously right now for the next few seasons, I think K-Love will probably live up to the contract, but it comes more so when he's 33, 34. What do you think is going to come about this contract?
I mean, the injury concerns are bad for sure, because especially recently he seems to get more and more injured. Luckily, his kind of game should age well because he doesn't rely on athleticism. He's always been more of a skill player. He's a really good shooter. So he should kind of have a role for a while, kind of like, Dirk is kind of now, just like a really good shooter, but struggles on defense and can't do much else. But yeah, going into 34 is a little much for me. I wouldn't have done it, but Dan Gilbert is Dan Gilbert.
that's just saying it nicely.
Yeah, that's the only way I could put it.
I think, I mean, this is kind of one of the takes I have for the hot take shot fake thing. But I think, you know, out of this 4-year deal, we'll see 1.5 good years of Kevin Love.
Ooh.
I think overall this is going to go down as a really bad contract. Personally, I think he may be good this year, or he may only be good for half a year this year. I just don't see this being a good 4-year deal. I don't think Kevin Love's going to fall off the face of the earth by any means, but I don't think he's going to live up to what some people I think are expecting him to be.
Yeah, they're expecting to get back to that Minnesota Kevin Love and even being maybe a little bit better, especially with this Cavs roster not having a ton of help and established players out there. But Evan kind of hinted at this before. Do you think this contract is more likely to be traded or less likely to be traded now?
Way less.
I would say
way less.
but
I don't know anyone who wants to take $30 million Kevin Love at the age of 32 or 33. I think, I don't know. I don't see any team that would want to do that unless there's, a lot of draft picks being involved.
You got to really like Kevin Love, which I think is possible. And you think he could be, a piece that can get you over the top. So I wouldn't say it's like an immovable contract, but definitely a little harder to trade.
Something similar to the Blake Griffin deal. That was talked about that Blake would never be able to be moved, and then Detroit traded for him. And I mean, LA got some pretty nice assets for him too. That'd be ideal for the Cavs. But I tend to kind of agree with Kory a little bit on this. Like, I think it's less likely he's traded, but there may be a team out there like the Pistons or some team who thinks like Kevin Love's going to get us over that hump. He's going to take us to that next level, and we'll eat the contract in the last year or two. Worst case, we stretch it or something like that. But we've seen teams do way crazier things than trade for Kevin Love, who is a good player.
Exactly. Portland or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's even talk of like maybe the Raptors are going to go full out swing this year and try to trade for Love too, like, and just go all in one shot. But obviously doing this deal kind of sends the message for the Cavs that they're going to try to compete. What are your thoughts on the direction of this team not tanking?
I don't like it. I'm working on projections now. I think Cleveland is the 11th best team in the East. I think they think they're a little better than that. There's a lot of bad players on bad contracts still there. J.R. Smith, George Hill, Tristan Thompson. And they need to start clearing some of these guys off the books. And, I mean, I think they still have to give the Hawks like a first round for Korver.
Yeah, it's top 10 protected too. That's why a lot of people were surprised with this, because now they're most likely going to give that pick to the Hawks. And the other scenario where they were tanking, they'd keep the pick, and then I believe it turns into probably something a little bit less in the future.
And it doesn't make sense to me, but hopefully when they start the season like 10-24 or something, reality kicks in. And then they start the rebuild. But yeah, I don't like this direction.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's to me, it's just a point of them wanting to stick it to LeBron and kind of like show the fans we're not going to just throw right into a rebuild after losing LeBron for the second straight time or whatever. I think it's more of just like a pride thing. I really feel like that's what this comes down to. But that's not to say it's not a dumb move. I think this team would be smart to blow it up and just kind of rebuild and play for after the Warriors. You're not playing for anything. Why get why get no lottery picks or high lottery picks when you can maybe get, some, top 5 picks? I think it would be smart to rebuild and retool, or not retool, to rebuild and shop some of these guys, but they want to try and play for the 8th seed. So, I mean, I have at it, battle with the Knicks for 10th in the East and, have a ball.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I would agree with you guys. I probably would have went more into the tanking route, at least you could still maintain competitiveness and still tank at the same time. The one issue I think I have with this roster is just a lack of young talent. Obviously, they drafted Colin Sexton. They have Chetty Osman, Larry Nance Jr., Jordan Clarkson, Ante Zizic. Like, there's a couple guys, but none of them really stick out. I don't know. Are you guys high on Colin Sexton?
He had a pretty good summer league, and I'm sure he'll be a good player, but starting right off the bat, I think he'll definitely experience some growing pains, but I hope they start him and give him lots of opportunities. I think that makes more sense than starting George Hill, who is washed.
I mean, I think, yeah, Sexton has some nice moments. I mean, him flexing is probably the moment that sticks out the most on Josh Hart. But, he's got some potential. But, yeah, there's really not any, young player on this team you think they have to keep.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that's the area where they need to improve. Even if you want to stay competitive, I think they need to find a way to get some more young talent, obviously. Talking about competitive, you guys kind of hinted at where you think they'll land. Where do you think is the realistic scenario for the Cavs team this year? Best case, worst case? Obviously, this is super early, but it's always fun.
I would put him in the 35 win range right now. So definitely a bad team, but not awful. Best case, things click and Love goes back to Minnesota. Love and, they're the 8th seed or something, get 41 wins. Worse, probably 28 to 30. So I think they end up in the 33, 35 win range. They have a lot of bad players and some decent young guys, and the only solid person is Love. It doesn't add up to a very good team, even in the East.
Yeah, a lot of flaws. And there's a lot of guys on the team that can only do like one or two things really good, and the other things they do are terrible.
Exactly.
I mean, in the power rankings for OTG that we did, I had the Cavs 20th. I think they're looking at anywhere from 25 to 35 wins. Best case scenario would probably be 35 wins, but they probably hover near like 32, 33.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, just given the roster and what the East is like and things along those lines.
This Kevin Love probably does give you 10 wins, but maybe he gives you 15 wins, I guess. But I don't know. Like Evan mentioned, George Hill is probably your second best player, and he's last year he's just so consistent.
That's a great question, actually. Who's the Cavs' second best player?
Larry Nance, which is sad.
I would say I'm not going to be that disrespectful. I think George Hill is probably the second best player because he can. If they re-signed Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood might be the second best player, but I think it's George Hill.
They ask him to.
Yeah. Well, this year he'll probably be playing 36 minutes a game, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one wild card for them, to be honest. Rodney Hood had some really nice moments in Utah where people were like, oh, this guy has a lot of potential. He's lighting it up. He's scored 20 plus, 30 plus in games before, and he's been really hot. I know from just daily fantasy sports with like FanDuel and stuff, there was a month before where you've had to play him because he was such a great value. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he can do and get back to that level. Obviously, only 25 years old. There's a lot of potential still there with Hood. What do you expect from him this year? Do you think he could have a bounce back season?
Well, I mean, yeah, if they re-sign him, which I think they will, and probably to cheap because no one wants to pay him right now. And I'm sure that will definitely motivate him. So I'm sure he'll have a bounce back year. I mean, there's no way he could possibly be worse than he was in Cleveland last year. I'm a Hood fan offensively. He can really fill it up when he gets hot, as you said. Defensively, there's obviously some issues, but he's still young and he can shoot. There's value. I mean, Cleveland should definitely sign him, and they definitely should play him a lot of minutes because why not?
Yeah, I think Rodney Hood could be huge for this team. Like you mentioned, Nick, I played him in FanDuel a few times myself. He always played 6-man minutes over there in Utah. I think in a starter's role, maybe, him not having to play under LeBron's shadow, which I think impacted him heavily the first little stint here in Cleveland. I think he could actually have a big year. He still plays good defense, just the offensive consistency that he lacks. But with more playing time, more confidence, that could really flip the switch. I think Rodney Hood, like you kind of mentioned when we started this, is a huge S factor for this team. And who knows, if Rodney Hood gets re-signed, he plays, way above his ceiling, or if he takes a huge jump, let's say he's averaging 21 points per game, and then Kevin Love's averaging 23 points per game. George Hill stepped it up a little bit. Maybe this team does kind of slip into that 7 seed range. Maybe they actually get a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big wild card, and obviously he's still a free agent but restricted, and I think it's most likely he ends up back. It would be a really bad move for the Cavs not to keep him unless he was like, no, I'm not playing there. But he's a guy I would keep an eye on. Quickly, before we get out of the Cavs, what would be your ideal starting lineup for them next season?
Oh, God. Okay. All right, I would start Love at the 4 with Nance at the 5, Sexton at point guard, Cedi Osman on the wing, and Rodney Hood at shooting guard.
Actually doesn't sound like completely terrible. Like, I mean, it's not great, obviously, but it seems like it could be kind of fun.
It would be a fun league pass team.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to go the boring route. I'm going to say George Hill, or Colin Sexton, George Hill, Rodney Hood, Kevin Love, and then Tristan Thompson.
I could see that one too. I mean, I would.
That's probably what they will start.
Yeah, I have a feeling they'll probably start Thompson. I mean, they're giving him a lot of money, and he's the guy saying everyone's going to be better on the Cavs because LeBron's not there and whatnot. But
he played decent in the playoffs too once he started getting minutes.
Yeah, I mean, he's limited, but he does bring some energy when he wants to. All right, Evan, it was great having you on. Appreciate you taking the time to talk a little bit of Melo and K-Love.
All right, thanks guys for having me. Take care.
All right, Kory, no Evan, just you and I, but let's hit him with another segment. What do you got today?
Hot take or shot fake. We're back at it again, giving the people what they want. 3 hot takes I've seen on the internet. This one, to start off, is it's funny because I've been thinking about it since I read it. Hot take or shot fake. Is Kyrie Irving outside of the top 5 in the Eastern Conference in players?
I don't think so. I think he would be in my top 5. So I'm saying that's a shot fake because I think, Kawhi 100% healthy is number 1. Then you have obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then I think it's a toss up for number 3 between Joel Embiid and Kyrie Irving. Obviously John Wall could get up there as well, but a lot depends on health. You could probably argue Bradley Beal as well. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I was making my lineup too, and I didn't rank the guys, but I was just kind of thinking who are top 5 players in the East. So obviously Kawhi healthy is in the top 5. Joel Embiid as well. I think Victor Oladipo is in it now, or he's got. To me, he's in it now, so I really don't care about anything else. So those 3 guys, and then I think about the last 2 spots, and I was Andre Drummond, borderline top 5. Blake Griffin, borderline if he's healthy. Kevin Love, yikes! I mean that's a weak top 5 player. Kemba Walker, Antetokounmpo, I didn't even say him. He's for sure in it. I think Kyrie Irving has to be in it. I don't see a guy who's at least, maybe if Porzingis is really healthy and he's playing above his ceiling, he's top 5. But there's no way that Kyrie Irving is not top 5 in the East.
Yeah, I've seen people saying, he's not even going to be a top 3 player on his own team by the end of the season. People forget about players so much when they don't play or they miss time. Same thing with Kawhi. People are sleeping on him like he's not good. Obviously, there's some health concern. But we've seen Kyrie do amazing things in the NBA. He's honestly had amazing performances in the NBA Finals. He's been huge in the playoffs. Last year at Boston, he was great. Obviously, the injury hurt him and he couldn't play in the playoffs. But I think there's a little bit of almost disrespect on Kyrie's name right now.
There seems to be that seems to be how it always is with Kyrie, right? It seems like when we see him,
he's either overrated or underrated. It's like flip flops constantly.
100%. It's what have you done for me lately? And that's Kyrie Irving always gets that kind of treatment. It feels like.
What do you got?
So next up, we just obviously got done talking about Kevin Love, but this was a tweet I saw. Kevin Love's contract will go down as one of the top 5 worst NBA contracts of all time. Shot fake or hot take?
That is a shot fake. I think it might end up being a bad contract, but I think there's way worse contracts currently in the NBA. You look at Timothy Mozgov, Joakim Noah, Chandler Parsons, just to name a few. And then I'm sure there's plenty of contracts I would even throw freaking Darren Williams' contract in there from when he signed with the Nets because the last 2 years got stretched. So that's already 4 contracts that I personally think are worse than that contract. And if I dug a little bit deeper, I'm sure I could pull out probably 10 more.
Yeah, I'm saying hot take. I hinted at this when we just talked about it with Evan. I think Kevin Love's only going to play a year and a half good of this 4-year deal. I think he's going to break down and fall apart. So I'm going to say hot take. I think this will go down possibly as one of the top. I mean, it's tough. I don't want to say exactly the top 5 because, like you said, I don't have research.
I think he'll still be playable. He might definitely deteriorate, but I think he'll, like Evan kind of mentioned before, at worst, he's kind of like Dirk where he can't play defense. He can just shoot and be a guy off the bench, where I think there's other guys who literally you can't play. Like guys like Mozgov and Noah who literally you can't put on the court because they're just not good enough to play in the NBA at this point.
Right. Well, then they're only making $17 million a year. But I mean, if he becomes a Dirk and we're seeing him play like that offensive role for 20 to 25 minutes, and he's making $30 million. I mean, I just can't in my brain make that anything less than a really bad contract.
I think it could be a bad contract, but I don't think it would be an all-time bad contract. I think it could end up being top 5 at that point in the league. You know, maybe you might be like, all right, top 5 worst contracts in 2022 or something. And you're like, all right, Kevin Love, like that makes more sense. But I think all time, I think that's a little bit of a push just because there's so many bad contracts in the history of the NBA where guys just literally can't play on the court.
Right. Next up, your Brooklyn Nets. This was just I didn't see this until Jack tweeted it. The Brooklyn Nets were ranked 28th in the ESPN Power Rankings, I believe. Hot take or shot fake them being ranked 28th?
I think that's such a shot fake. I mean, and that's without even any bias. Like, why would the Nets get worse from last season? They weren't the 3rd worst team in the league last year. And obviously they're known for player development, have a lot of young guys. A lot of guys made a huge jump last year. They also added a couple veterans to kind of build on their depth this year. I don't see that at all. I mean, that's obviously I have a little bit of a tainted view, but personally, I think 28th is highly disrespectful saying that they got worse from last year. That's disrespectful to the coaching staff, in my opinion.
100%. It's a shot fake. I can name Hawks, Kings, Knicks, Magic, Suns. All those teams right there, I think, are all worse than the Nets right off the start. You know, and then you can make the case for the Bulls maybe being worse. Yeah, I'm right there with you. The Nets.
I honestly can make a case for the Cavs being worse if I really wanted to like make an argument because I think people are just assuming like, oh, these guys aren't going to get better. Like, why wouldn't Jared Allen get better? Why wouldn't D'Angelo Russell get better? Why wouldn't Karis LeVert, Rondé, Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris? Like, these guys have only had like 1 or 2 years in the Nets system, whether they're coaching staff. So obviously there's more room for improvement, and that's what they preach like big time in Brooklyn. I think there's still like a little bit of a bad perspective of the Nets still from the Billy King days where people forget that like, all right, this is a different team than what we saw when they made that terrible trade with Boston.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of young guys, and you know, the thing I love about the Nets so far, you know, just going into this offseason is the fact that the team is hanging out a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that seems really close, and I'm a big guy on chemistry and teams looking like they're actually enjoying playing with each other, which you know, some teams like the Cavaliers last year, that was a team that didn't look like they had fun ever playing. I mean, every once in a while they had some smiles, but that looked like a miserable team in locker room. As to, you know, the Nets, Pacers, those teams, they played together, they played for each other, and you could see that and feel that on the court. So, I like that about the Nets, and I think you add that with the fact that D'Lo, if he's healthy, is probably going to get better. Like you mentioned, Karis LeVert gets better. They added a couple of pieces in Ed Davis and Kenneth Faried, who helps in the biggest deficiency they have, which is rebounding. I just don't see, like you said, I don't see any way this team got worse over this offseason.
I can't lie. I screenshotted that for sure, just so I can have it when I'm looking later in the season and just laugh about it because I just don't think it's likely unless they were to go into tank mode. And then everything, obviously, I'm giving you a little bit more in-depth information on the Nets. I have the Brooklyn Buzz with Jack if you want more. But even just listening to the press conferences of guys like Ed Davis, who spoke to the media, I believe, yesterday or the day before, he was talking about the message from the front office, the coaching staff, and the players is like, we're going to compete. We're not here to tank. So it's not like the Nets are going to tank this season either. Which I'm sure there'll be a couple teams that probably do just because it makes more sense for them. But I think for the Nets, you know, a goal for them is to be competitive, be closer to that 8 seed than being closer to the bottom because they want to attract a big-time free agent next year. And a big-time free agent doesn't want to go to a losing situation that doesn't look like there's any possibility of having success.
No, without a doubt. Last one. Hot take or shot fake. The Los Angeles Clippers will surprisingly finish with a better record than the Los Angeles Lakers.
That is a shot fake. LeBron is not going to have a lesser record than the Clippers. I think the Clippers are going to be a competitive team, but I think the Lakers have more talent and they have LeBron, which is obviously the deciding factor in like every single argument you could have. LeBron James is the best player in the world right now, arguably the best player of all time. I don't think he's going to have the lesser record in his own city. Well, not his own city, but his city now.
I'm actually like on the fence with this one. This one's tough for me. I'm gonna say shot fake because I've learned never to bet against LeBron James, but I wouldn't be necessarily shocked if the Clippers did finish with a couple more wins, only because the Lakers do have just a strange assortment of players. I mean, you know, Lance, JaVale, Rondo, the spacing isn't great. You know, if these young guys don't take a jump in their game. I mean, I could see things in with the Lakers this year going horribly wrong. But again, I can't bet against LeBron James until I see him on the court with this roster and how it looks.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think the Clippers are going to make the playoffs, and I think the Lakers will make the playoffs. So just that fact alone, I think will be enough because the West is going to be so tight. And I know I talked bad about some of the Lakers signings on the last show, but I think the one thing that's kind of getting underrated with the Lakers is the young talent they do have, like Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart. Like these aren't bad players, and they're going to get better this year, especially having LeBron around them. That's just like extra motivation.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's one thing that I think does go in the positive column.
Yeah, and then you look at the Clippers roster, they have a lot of depth on their team, but there's not a lot of really great talent over there where you're like, oh God, we have to worry about this player every single night. Like they're just gonna be more so an annoying competitive team to play every night.
Right, I agree.
All right, so that was hot take or shot fake. Obviously, we did overhyped or underhyped, so we kind of hitting you guys with some segments all summer long, keep it interesting and hot. But that wraps it up for today. As always, big thanks to Evan for hopping on. Kory, always great recording with you, and thank everybody for listening. Check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, YouTube. Subscribe, retweet, share. Let us know what you think.
Always a pleasure. Peace out, knuckleheads.